Hey everybody, Joe here, back, just wanted to share a little something, do a little bit more than just my blog this week, since I skipped last week. This week's theme blog was, memories of this thing right over here, the Atari 2600, also known as the Atari VCS. This here is the very 2600 that I grew up with. It's been around as long as I can remember. Actually, doing a little research, this version came out in 1980. So, yeah, no wonder I don't remember anything before having it, because it's probably bought it when I was like a year or two old. Okay, on we go. In fact, before I go forward, if you look, this is the actual joystick, and you can actually see like teeth marks in it from when I was real little, chewing on this thing. Can you believe that? Okay, let's go. Let's talk about some of the games. I have like about over 60 in my collection, but I'm just going to show you a few. Mostly some of my favorites, but there's some other ones. Most people think, immediately of the arcade ports that came out, such as, Space Invaders. Or, let's say, maybe Asteroids. Totally different, really, than the arcade on this one, since the arcade used vector graphics, but hey, it actually plays really well, even now. Not all the good games were actually made by Atari. Nintendo, of course, made a Donkey Kong series, and these games were ported to the 2600 by Coleco. That's right, Coleco. Which is kind of cool. I mean, actually, it's kind of weird when you think about it, because they were also competitors to Atari, because they had the ColecoVision on the market starting in '82. And, that's like, Sony making games for the Xbox now. Okay. Kind of weird. Actually, similar stuff did happen before. Atari, under the Tengen brand name, made some games for the NES. Oddly enough, some of them are actually ports of Sega arcade games, but that's another story. Okay. Moving on. Okay, not all the games I have over here. I only have a little pile I'm showing you. Not all these are good, but some of these are actually just over here because I have such memories of them. Game that's I don't know if I really want to call it good, but something I remember quite well is video pinball. The most basic, pinball requirements. You got flippers, you got some scoring areas, and then you've got this square bouncing around the screen. Otherwise, actually, it's kind of fun. I mean, it definitely does not hold up, but pinball video games have always been kind of weird. I haven't played very many new ones, but I can't imagine they're the same as playing on a real table. Okay. Here's one that people talk about. Oh, drop my mic. Okay, here's one people talk about. Not necessarily as a good game, but I always had memories and I always enjoyed this game. Ghostbusters. I mean, some people say the 2600 version is a lot more playable than the NES, which is very true. Some of the things you need to do to get the game to work, like flipping the difficulty switches on the console, seems a little strange, but on a game that was originally based on, like, I believe, early computer game, and then putting it on a system with just one button on the controller, I mean, you had to do what they had to do. Alright. Okay, now, Breakout. The one and only game that I ever had growing up that required the paddles. It was kind of, a very different change of pace. I mean, I've got to play like Circus Atari and other games with my friends at their houses, whatever. But, I never really owned them. In fact, the only ones I currently own are this and Super Breakout. Okay. This is one that I did not have as a kid. I actually, my sister found a big pile of ColecoVision stuff at an antique store about, I guess, around 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that. And it was 2 ColecoVision units, 2 expansion modules, a dozen ColecoVision games, I think it was, and then about 20 to 30 Atari 2600 games, since the Module 1 for the ColecoVision actually played 2600 games, which was kind of neat, but the video was always really grainy, doesn't always look right on the ColecoVision, so I just still keep it mostly in a closet and have a lot of 2600 games to play. Nothing wrong with that. And this one I always found kind of interesting. Jawbreaker. If you look, it's made by Tiger Electronics. You know, people in the late '80s, early '90s who made those funky handhelds. Okay, it's kind of like a PacMan ripoff, kind of like aimed at little kids. You know, you should be brushing your teeth, you know, after eating candy types of thing. But it's actually really fun. A lot harder than actual regular PacMan too. Okay, as I was mentioning with Donkey Kong made by Coleco, the rest of the competition, they actually got in on the fun too. M Network games were produced by Mattel. Mattel had the Intellivision, very weird shaped cartridge actually, if I'm not mistaken. Intellivision cartridges are this wide, but then this part here is like the cartridge was widened to fit the Atari slot instead of the way the actual Intellivision carts were. I think that's right. I'm sure someone on the internet will correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, moving on. Okay, board game companies even got in on the games. You can see there's a Parker Brothers logo on the back of this cartridge, and this game, actually, I have memories of it being kind of fun, but it is pretty cheesy when you look at it now, and that would be SpiderMan. All I gotta say about this is Angry Video Game Nerd did a pretty cool video of Spider-Man games. It's one of those superheroes who really not very many games did proper justice to. I'm sure there's some, but I haven't played any of them yet. Okay, here's a game. Speaking of Angry Video Game Nerd, he never actually reviewed it, but it's pictured in some of his early intros. Haunted House. This is probably one of the most pointless games I have ever played or seen in my life. I had no idea what to do, ever. It wasn't until, like, I guess, I was in my mid-20s when somebody actually told me how you finish a level. I was still like, I don't even want to get into it. Okay, moving on, let's bring out a better game. Miss Pac-Man. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the debacle that was the original Atari Pac-Man. They made up for it with this one, I think. This plays really good. Looks great, especially compared to the original 2600 Pac-Man. And they even do like a little bit of the arcade-style beginning intro without all the text and whatever. But still, you know, they did a lot more with this one. I think they increased the memory compared to what's on the original one. But then again, most of these games were like really small. I mean, you could fit I think you could fit the entire back catalog in of ROMs for 2600 on like a single like floppy disk. Seriously. Okay. Speaking of Pac-Man, I got it right here. At one point, they even put this as the pack-in game for the 2600. Can you believe that? I couldn't when I heard that. I mean, you saw mine. That came with combat. Okay. What can be said about this that hasn't already? Nothing, really. So I'm just gonna... Alright, the last game on the pile here is my personal favorite 2600 game. It's actually one that came out after the video game Crash, as it's called. Stargate. It has nothing to do with Kurt Russell or Richard Dean Anderson for that matter, but that's another story. Okay. It's the sequel to Defender. You know, space shooting. Some of the smoothest scrolling ever in a 2600 game that I've ever seen. It's really fun. Looks really good. If you were to actually compare it side by side with the NES port of this game, which is actually called Defender 2 since Atari had the rights, really they look fairly similar, except for there's a little more colors and everything moves a hell of a lot faster in the in the NES version. But still, this is really, really fun, and I spent a hell of a lot of time playing this. And seeing that it came out in '87, that means I got it brand new when it came out, so that's pretty cool too. Did not know that. You know, stuff like when a game came out, I had no clue about when I was a little kid. Okay. Well, this took a little longer than I thought, but hey, I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm not going to do any editing. I'm just going to slap this right up, you know, a little commando style or whatever you want to call it. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more, let me know. You know, subscribe, like, whatever. You know, be sure to follow me on Twitter, you know, at JoGoesRetro, or if you haven't already, like the page on Facebook, facebook.com/JoGoesRetro. As you may or may not already know, the blog is tumblr.com/JoGoesRetro. Yes, I got that on every single account that I could come up with anymore, so I'm out there. Just come find me. Love to hear what you think of what I'm doing. Take care.